Okay, in this IRA tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to create a rope tool using the cable actor component. And you can see I have a cable actor component here, and then I also have my rope tool here. And so this is super handy. So those of you that are familiar with the cable actor tool, it's kind of challenging to work with if you want to lay a bunch of cables together, like string them along like a room or a building or across a ceiling. This would be really tedious because you have to copy it. And like set every length, set the endpoints, and it's a buzzkill. So if you look at this rope tool that I've put together, it's great. So you can just drag off of a spline and it auto generates everything for you. Those of you who are familiar with my power line system, this is very similar to that in terms of how the power lines are laid out, although this is a much more simplified system, and at some point I have to redo that tutorial to make it simpler and basically follow the same blueprint setup that this has. So as you can see here, that's great. You can just auto-generate cables wherever you want. You can even individually select which cable in an array and add slack to it. So let's say this first cable here, which is 0, let's say I want 25 for slack. Okay, so got a good amount of slack there, and I could just kind of randomly select some of these and throw in some slack to make it more varied. And there you have it. It automatically does that. So it calculates the length and then adds that extra bit of slack onto it. So that's pretty handy. So like really quickly, you can just iterate with cables and throw them in. And this is a super simple tool. So let's get into it and show you how it's made. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is let's just right-click down here in our content browser and let's create a new blueprint class. This will just be an actor, and I'm going to call this rope underscore tool underscore 2 because I already have rope tool 1 here, or the original rope tool. And let's just drag that out into our level. Let me just turn away from the other rope tool there. Okay, and so let's go ahead and open that blueprint up. I'm going to drag it onto the main screen here. And the first thing we're going to want to do is go to our construction script, because this is where it's going to be running. And we're going to want to add a spline, because that's where our rope, it's basically we're going to be using that as a guide for our rope. So go ahead and add the spline component. You can just leave it as spline, that's totally fine. So let's grab a reference to this, and then let's get the number of spline points. Okay, so we're going to have to use those. And let's promote this to a variable so we can easily grab it and use it wherever we want in our graph. So let's call that just number of spline points. Okay. And then I want to iterate across this. So I want to use a for loop. For loop, here we go. Okay, and we can start it at 0, that's fine. And then in this instance, I'm going to want to subtract 2. Oops, I don't know why I just did that. I want to subtract, so let's do integer minus an integer. I'm going to take off 2, and that will make it so, you'll see in a sec, but it'll make it so I don't make more components, spline components, than I need to. And they won't be like hanging at the end of my of my spline tool. You'll see in a sec. So now that I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and just promote the index here to a variable. I'm going to say it's going to be called index of loop, and I'm going to be able to grab. I want to be able to grab that variable later, and it just keeps things nice and clean if I can just not run wires out to everything. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is, obviously we're going to need cable components. So I have this for loop here. So for the number of spline points I have, it's going to use this for loop, and it's going to iterate over that loop. So every time it has a spline point, it's going to do an action. And what we want to do is, like looking at this spline right here, every new point there is, we want it to loop and go, all right, I know my beginning point, I know my end point, I'm going to spawn a cable, it's going to connect here, it's going to set the end point here, and it's going to set the width and the stiffness and basically everything else that we need to make each section of the spline. So we obviously need to add a cable component. So let's go ahead and add cable component. And then we need to be able to get the location of where we, where do we want to place this thing? And obviously we want to place it at its designated spline point. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab another, just going to copy that, or you can just drag it off like this. I'm going to get another reference to the spline. And I want to get location at a spline point. Yeah, so get location at a spline point. Go ahead and click on that. And then I want to use my index of loop right here, right? Because this is going to iterate over the number of spline points that I have, and it's going to go, okay, at index 1, it's the first point, or it's probably index 0. The first point on the spline, it's going to get that location at the spline point. And we can leave it as local, and so we have that location now. So let's just, let me slide this over a little bit so I have more room to work with here, because I know it's going to get a little filled up in a sec. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to basically plug it in here. So we know we want the cable component to start at that spline location, right? So that's good. And the next thing we want is we want to do this again, but instead of getting the first point, we want to get the second point. So we need to know where it starts and where we need to set that end vector location. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. And then in the index of loop, I'm going to go ahead and add 1. So let's see. So I'm going to integer plus an integer and plug it in here. So that means that when it's looking for a location, it's going to get the one ahead of it every time. And that way I can have my end and I can have my beginning. So I want to, let's save this right here. So let's go ahead and save this component. We'll just call it cable. Actually, let's call it current cable. So we know it's the current one being used. So it'll use it down the chain, right? Because we're doing loops. And we just want to be able to keep that consistent. And when it's iterating, it'll just use that. It'll set it and use it for each time it loops, or each iteration of that loop. So let's see here. I have and in the beginning. So we actually have to set that. So I basically just want to grab my current cable here, and then I want to say set end location. Okay, so it's spawning in the right spot, and this is our end location, so I'll just stick that right there. That'll be good. The current cable. And you could just run in like directly if you want to. I just like it better, if I can just reference that variable, and I can have a whole line of these things and not have to run wires to everything. It's just a preference, so whatever you want to do. Either way works. And then what do we want to do next? So I think next we want to do the cable length. So I want to subtract these two vector locations and then get the vector length. So that'll give me just the distance between the two. So let's do that. So let's say subtract and do vector minus a vector. So we got this right here. And then let's say vector length. Yeah, so I want to get the vector length here. And that'll give me the distance between the end and the beginning points. And then as I have that, then I can set the cable length for this iteration. So it's going to set the length between the two spline points. So let's go ahead and take this, just copy it again, and I'll just say cable length. Set cable length. And run that in. So I'm going to compile this right now, and then in my viewport, I should have, yep, that's what I expect. So you can see that it does exactly what we just set it to do. Begin location, the end location, and then it sets that length between the two. Obviously, it adds the cable component itself. And if I were to grab one of these points, you can see that it is working as expected. It is auto-generating the cable as it should. So let's go back here. So that's really easy. And if you guys remember my old tutorial for the powerline spline system, I had a really convoluted system for adding it all together, and most of that was just out of ignorance. I wasn't fully sure. I know there's always a better way, right? And this is definitely a cleaner and better way to set this up. So ignore that old information. The next thing I want to do is I just want to set some variables here for the cable, for the current cable. So I want to make sure that, let's see, I want to set the solver iterations, and let's just say like 10 is a good number. So I got my solver iterations, and I just want to set those to 10, and that'll just help with the quality of the line. And then I also want to enable stiffness. So let's enable stiffness. That'll make it look better. Oops. Enable set stiffness. Okay, let's enable that. Plug it in. and that'll help stop things from, just kind of flopping around everywhere when it spawns. And then I want to do cable width as well. So let's do set cable width. Set cable width. Okay, so we have cable width here, and I'm going to set that to 3 as a default, just so we can take a look at that. Okay, looks all right. And I want to promote some of these to variables. Now, I'm going to leave solve rotations at 10 because I'm fine with that. But you could promote any of these to a variable and then set it, public, so you could then edit it in the editor. I'm going to do cable width, but feel free to, set any other settings that you'd like. So, just name this appropriately, cable width, and compile that. And since I already had 3 in that spot when I made it, it's defaulting to 3. I'm going to make that public so I can take a look at it. And you can see right here, okay, so I got this, and cable width, I'll just do a quick test. Okay, you can see that it's working. And then if I grab a spline point, and then I hold Alt and drag off, generates another. Pretty cool, seems to be doing its job. Awesome, so look how simple that is. Already, this has taken just a couple minutes, and look at all the iteration you can do here. It's great. All right, so now that we have this set up right here, if you look at the editor, we have our system working, and it looks pretty good. It does what it's supposed to do. What else can we add to this? So in my system, I have it so there's an array where you can dynamically add slack between each rope if you would like. So let's go ahead and do something similar. Let's see here. So in order to do this, I am going to add a new, let's see, I'm going to add a new float here, but we can change it in a sec. Let's just call this slack to add array. Make it visible, and then up here, just go ahead and change this to a float, and then right next to here, if you click this, you can change it to an array, because we're going to have an array of these values, right, that we're going to iterate over with our loop. So compile that. You can not do anything with that right now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drag this out. If you hold Alt, then we're going to drag this out. If you hold Control, I'll just give you that variable, and we'll pull off that, and we'll say get. We'll get a reference, okay? And then for our index loop right here, just grab that, plug it in here, and then when this loops, it's going to be doing this logic, and this is going to hook up to it. It's just going to be getting the proper position, right? So it's going to get that proper position with the loop, with the index of loop, and then the array we have, if we add any numbers to this, it's going to then use the specific number, that correlates to the index of the loop. So I have that get right there. And let's just add, so plus we'll do float plus float. And I'm going to put that in the bottom just because that makes me feel better, even though it doesn't actually change anything in this instance. I'm going to plug it in right here, okay? So I got that. And so, okay, so I also want to check to make sure that the index that it could be referencing is valid, right? Because it's going to loop over the whole thing, but if I only have like 2 slots where it's modifying it, then that's obviously going to be a problem, because it's going to try to reference something that's not in the array. So just really quickly, so if I have all of these points, but I'm only adding 2, so I add 2 slots to the array, well, then it's going to try to reference on points in that array that don't exist. Which is obviously a problem, because it'll return, I believe, it'll yell at me basically. It'll be like, "Yay, man, there's nothing here. This is an error." So basically, let's just throw an is valid on here. So array is valid. I have context sensitive on, so it'll just pop up. And then once again, I'm going to plug that in there, so it's checking the right index of loop reference. And then I'm going to throw a branch onto the end of this. So if it's valid, I want to add these together and do this. So let me copy this so I have 2 instances of this. Let me slide all this down. Pull this. Yeah, that's good there. So let me put this right up here. So if it's true, it's going to take the combined, so it's going to get that extra slack value. It's going to combine it with the actual length, and it'll go here. So that's true. If it's false, meaning that it's not valid, it's just going to use the actual distance in between. All right, and then we'll just run it back up to here. So this you know, this is legit. So this will make it so we can have slack where it needs slack, and where it doesn't need slack, it's not going to try to reference a value that doesn't exist within this array and cause an error. And I think that's good. So let me go ahead and click on the slack to add, and let's see. Yep, I already made it public. We'll compile that. So we're going to come out here, and we're going to add some slack. So I'll add a couple in here like this, and let's say on the first one I want to do 25. Awesome, it seems working. On this one I just want to do 10. This one I want to do 5. Let's try 10 on that as well. Really? Is it just because it's... Oh, okay, so that is working. It was just straight up and down. It looked weird. So let's see. Yeah, so 10. Oops. 10. Let's add one more point here. And just because I'm a crazy man, I'll throw in 100. Yeah, crazy. Let's change to 25. Okay, so you can see that's working pretty well. So we have slack where we need slack. Now, the last thing I want to do here is we want to be able to set basically the color and the material. Now, there's a few ways that we could go about doing this. And the way I choose to do this for a lot of my tools is I like to create a dynamic material instance and then set and basically use like a standard shader that I have. Like I have like a main shader for my game, and then I just reference that. So I'm going to show you how that works. So let's see here. Okay, so I want to do a material interface. Yeah, but I want to, okay. So I want to make I'll show you how this all works. So let's just see. So let's just call this material we'll just call it base material. Base material. And come up here and click type and in search do a material interface. Oops, material interface, and then do the object reference. So let's compile that real quick and just check this out. Oh, it's an array. I was like, what is going on here? So change this, because I used the last variable type when I was making it. So change that to just a single one here. Compile that again. Okay, so we got the base material here. Now in our game, like I was saying before, I have IMAT. I could do like one texture, one color, IMAT, whatever, whatever have you. So I'm going to do IMAT one color for my base material, and I'm just going to drag this out here real quick. Get base material. Okay, and then I want to create a dynamic material instance based on this. So create dynamic material instance. Well, to create dynamic material instance. Okay, it's just more of what I'm used to there. And obviously this base is its parent. And let's just run this completed into this. So it's going to run this whole loop, and then it's going to do this, and I'll show you why in a sec. Now, this could be done a few different ways, but this is just how I prefer to do it. So I got this right here, and then let me just go ahead and save this so I can easily reference it. We'll call this dynamic material. Dynamic material. Dynamic. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Don't be me. Learn how to spell, kids. Dynamic material. That's great. Okay, so I have that right there. And then I want to set this material on the cable component. So there's a few ways I could do this. You know what I'm going to do? I am going to come up here, and on the end of this, I'm going to basically add every cable that is added to the loop. I want to add it to an array so I can easily reference it. I could totally do it that way. Yeah, I could. Yeah, you know what? This will be fun. We'll do it this way. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a new variable, and I'm going to say array of cables. That should be, once again, learn how to spell, kids. Don't be me. Array of cables. All right, so I'm going to get this and make sure you change the variable type to array. And it's obviously material interface, which I don't want. So go ahead and set this for, let's just do like, a cable actor object reference. Actually, this is going to be a cable component. I'm being silly. So it's cable component object reference. Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. And then let's go ahead and drag it out. If you hold Control, it'll give me a reference to that. Drag off this. say add. I can add it to an array. Okay, so it's going to add it to this array right here. And what are we going to add? We're going to add in the current cable, right? So it's going to loop, and it's going to, every time it does that, it's going to add them to the array, which is what we want. And then one more thing. I'm just going to take the array of cables, just copy that, bring it over to the beginning here. And every time it runs this script, I'm going to clear this because I don't want these to build up or have weird things happen. So if I clear that array first, it'll save me some headaches later on, probably. Can't hurt. So it's going to clear the array every time it runs this, so it doesn't just keep adding stuff up, which could be problematic. Okay, so I have this array of cables populated now. I'm going to copy that one more time. And I am going to... Basically, I want, for every cable, I want to set the material. So just search for set material. Let's see. Okay, so I turned off context sensitive. I'm just going to say set material. And that should be right. And it is at element index 0. So basically that's saying like the first material, which is only one on the cable actor component, so it's always going to be at 0 because this is a 0-based system. And then the target, I'm going to say all these buggers in the array. Plug that in here. And then I want to get that dynamic material, which is basically this. Just run it right in. And once again, if you want to expand this later, being able to save these instead of running, connections everywhere is just kind of nice. And then what I want to do now that I've set this, so it's like, okay, so I've set this material, but I want to be able to set like the color, or maybe even like the glow amount, for instance. So on my base material here, like I said, like everyone has their own main materials. On my base material here, if I open this up, you'll have a quick look at this. Oops, this is the wrong material. Let's see, I'm at one text, one color. Oh, okay. I'm at one color because I'm a ridiculous person and I have some extra stuff floating around in there. So let me compile that. So let's open this. So you can see here that I have a couple parameters. I have a vector parameter for color and I have a emissive parameter. So what I want to do is I want to be able to set those real time via my construction script, so I could set the color and the glow amount, basically, the emissive. So let's do that now. So basically I want to take my dynamic material, just copy and paste that, and then I want to set a scalar parameter, right? Let me turn on context sensitive because that just makes this easy. Set scalar parameter. So I got that. Set scalar parameter value. It's via collection. I don't want to do a collection. So I want to do set scalar parm. Did I spell that wrong? Let me turn off context sensitive again. Okay. Set scalar value parameter. On materials, I want to do this one right here. Nope, I did it wrong again. Set scalar. Let's do the first one. Okay, that one's the proper one. Okay, so sorry about that, but you're going to run the same thing. So sometimes you'll find functions that are named the same thing, but they are referencing different things. So this one's referencing things differently. Like the other one's referencing a parameter collection. And that can be a little confusing. So there's similar functions, they're just referencing different things. A lot of times there'll be a tooltip. You can scroll over and it says if it's a component or something like that that's referencing. So sorry for the little delay. Plug that into there because we're going to set this scalar value, in this instance. We're going to do a glow amount first. So let's do emissive. Oops. And let's just drag off this. Drag off this. And we'll promote that to a variable. Content sensitive on. Promote to variable. Say emissive. Okay, so we have emissive here. And then let's take that value right there and let's just promote it, make it public so we can see it. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to set vector parameter, so a color value basically. So set vector color parameter. Okay, this should probably now once again it's pointing me towards a parameter collection, which I'm not using right now. So set vector parameter value, and then I'm turn off this. I'm gonna grab the first one again, and that happens to be the correct one here. Plug that in, And we need the same. Once again, it's referencing the same dynamic material instance. I'm going to promote this to a variable here, the color. Just call it color. And then you also have to name these appropriately. So if you look at the material, I have color and emissive, and they have to, and the parameter name has to relate 1-to-1. So I actually have to write in here emissive and color. And if you don't do that, this will not work. Have to be exact. And let me just compile it real quick and then change the default value of this color. So right now it's black, and I want something that's a little bit more visible when I drop in level just when I'm working on it. So let's just say like red, orangey red, something like that. Hit OK. Compile. Now let's test this out. So I should be able to control the color and the emissive value of it without having to create other material instances on this tool, right? Because that's handy. You don't want to have to worry about coming coming down here and like right-clicking and creating material instance and do this for every instance of this tool. That'd be a pain, right? So let's click on this right now and take a quick look. Actually, let's see, rope tool. Yep, that's the right rope tool. Oh, never mind, it's not. Actually, it's my old rope tool. Wow, this one. So let's take a quick look right here. So you see I have emissive value. Oops. And I didn't make this public. So go ahead and make the color public if you haven't already. You're probably better than I am. You probably did that. So that's good. Let's see. So the color, let's just check to make sure it is that color. Yeah, see, this is orangey red color. And I can just change that on the fly. So let's make it blue. Dark blue or something like that. And yep, it's blue. And that's awesome. So you can set the color, and then you can also set the emissive amount. So I could just scrub this right now. And look, it's starting to glow, which is awesome. You want some neon ropes, want some crazy stuff like that? There you go. Let's really kick that up. Holy crap, look at that. That's wild. Let's make it a fun color. Whoa. Yeah, magenta, something like that. All right, so there you go. Control how bright it is, and you can also change the color, which is super cool. So that's basically it for the tutorial. Just to cover, everything once again, this is way simpler than using, or it's simple to put together, and it's significantly more convenient than using the cable actor component. It just takes those and kind of takes them to the next level. And you could use this in any game, and it would just be a great addition, for your toolkit.
I hope you found this tutorial helpful. We use these tools every day in our game Ira. If you want to learn more about Ira, feel free to click the Steam link in the description below. You can follow us or wishlist us there.